Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Jersey Cannabis Training Academy webinar series, where we focus on informing the public on the ins and outs of the cannabis industry in New Jersey. My name is Tahit Chappelle, and I'm the Executive Director of the Cannabis Training Academy. The CTA is a no-cost online technical assistance program aimed at helping New Jersey entrepreneurs understand the cannabis application and licensing process if they wish to pursue a cannabis license and operate a cannabis business in New Jersey. Today's topic focuses on the types of cannabis licenses available in New Jersey. The New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission, or the NJ-CRC, recently released 3 new cannabis licenses: delivery, wholesale, and distribution. Our guest for today, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission's Executive Director, Jeff Brown, takes us through these new license types and what prospective cannabis business owners need to know about applying for a cannabis license in New Jersey. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today and to talk about these types of cannabis licenses that exist in New Jersey, including these 3 new licenses. Let's start with a quick intro of yourself. Can you tell people who you are? How did you become the ED of the CRC? And what are your primary responsibilities?
Thanks, Tahid, and all the folks at Business Action Center for hosting this and having me today. I really appreciate it. Great opportunity to talk to prospective applicants about what they need to know in order to get into this, expanding industry and, really new industry here in New Jersey. I got into this. I came out of working in the healthcare world and primarily working on expanding access to healthcare services for underserved populations, working on Medicaid reform, accountable care organizations, just expansion of coverage. I had been doing that for several years, working with nonprofits, hospital associations. When Governor Murphy came into office, really under a pledge to make New Jersey more fair and equitable, I was interviewing for some positions, and I got asked whether or not I would consider being assistant commissioner for medicinal marijuana at the time under the Department of Health. It was not something that I anticipated being asked to do, but something that I'm glad I did, and really because it aligns with what my career goals have been, which is really, focusing on patient access. I do believe that cannabis is an important medicine. It's an important medicine for many people. We have about 100,000 people still in New Jersey who rely on it. And so, to be able to come in and help expand access in New Jersey was an amazing privilege and an honor. We were successful. We expanded from about 17,000 patients in the beginning of 2018 to a high point of 130,000 patients. We're now at 100,000 patients. But based on those successes, the governor asked me to come over along with our chairwoman, Chair Diana Waynu, to help lead the new Cannabis Regulatory Commission, which was created in law to legalize cannabis more broadly for adult use. And, again, I was humbled, privileged, honored to do that. And I've been, we've now been at it for, I believe, about 2.5 years here. It feels like a lot longer, but that's really how we got here.
Thank you, Jeff. And Jeff, you will be presenting a slideshow that talks us through the licenses. As you talk, just give us some information on what the application process looks like and what we need to know about these licenses.
Absolutely. And just give me one moment. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. All right. So again, thank you for having me. Today, I'm going to cover, basically an overview of where we are in New Jersey's market, what you as prospective applicants need to know about getting into this market, and then cover some hot topics, kind of some issues that are pertinent to anybody who wants to be in this industry, who wants to start a business here. So first off, covering the state of New Jersey's cannabis market, I'm going to give an overall status update, particularly as it pertains to licensing, go through the different license classes. As Tahid mentioned, we did open up for 3 new classes of licenses. Those are wholesalers, distributors, and delivery services. We had 3 existing classes of licenses plus testing laboratories already available and processing applications for. So I'll just cover those as well from a high level. talk about the application process, and then kind of expectations when it comes to the application schedule. And again, some important issues to keep in mind, like management services agreements and financial source agreements. So where we stand as of the beginning of this month at the CRC, we've received over close to 2,300 total applications. Of those, over 1,500 have been approved. We still have 137 pending in our Office of Licensing. About 348 are pending resubmission. Those are applications that had a deficiency and were issued a cure letter and have not resubmitted. And we have about 150 applications under review in the Office of Compliance and Licensing. Most of the applications that are under review at this point are either newer applications or applications that have have some issue with them that has prevented them from moving forward. I'll cover the different types of applications, but I did want to note that an encouraging sign is that we've received close to 400 conditional conversion applications. Our process is kind of split up between conditional licenses and annual licenses. And conditional applicants, it's a license type that's focused on people who meet certain income thresholds and other requirements, and is really meant as a sort of first step into the industry. And we're seeing more people be able to convert those to annual licenses, which is great. Most of our license approvals are conditional applications still, but we are seeing more of them, getting site control, getting municipal approval, filling out a full application, and moving through the process. So going to cover the license classes here, starting with Class 1. A Class 1 license is for a cultivator. A Class 1 cultivator can cultivate, grow, harvest, and package cannabis, can transport, transfer, sell usable and unusable cannabis to other cannabis cultivators and manufacturers. And the distinction there, when we're talking about usable cannabis, that's more, the flower, the actual parts of the cannabis plant that are more predominantly used in either directly sold as flower or used to process into manufactured products. Usable cannabis would be seeds, stalks, stems, things that can be used sometimes to extract or make into products, but the process is different, and it's so we distinguish those in rule, and I would encourage anybody to go look at that, how those are distinguished. What cultivators can't do, with just a cultivator license, are manufacture or create cannabis products, or transport and transfer or sell cannabis to consumers. So a Class 2 license is a manufacturer license. They can purchase usable and unusable cannabis from cultivators and other manufacturers. They can purchase from wholesalers. They can develop, produce, create, and package cannabis products. They can transport, transfer, or sell usable and unusable cannabis to other cannabis manufacturers or to wholesalers or retailers. They can't cultivate cannabis, however, and they can't transport or transfer or sell cannabis or cannabis products to consumers. Importantly, and I'll cover this once I get through all the license types, but you can be vertically integrated now, and you actually could hold a cultivator and a manufacturer license from day one, but now you can hold a manufacturer, cultivator, and a retailer license as well. A wholesale license is a Class 3 license. Wholesalers can purchase cannabis and cannabis items from cultivators, manufacturers. They can store that cannabis and cannabis items, and then they can transport usable cannabis and products to other wholesalers, manufacturers, and retailers. They can't grow, they can't manufacture, they can't transport directly to consumers, but they can purchase, store, and then transfer products to other businesses. A Class 4 license is a distributor license. These are really business to business. Think of them as business to business transport companies. So if a cultivator doesn't have the capacity to distribute their own product, which I presume many won't, then they can hire a distributor to move that product from the cultivator to a manufacturer, to a retailer, etc. They can temporarily store cannabis and cannabis products for transportation purposes, and they but they cannot cultivate, manufacture, or package. What they have to deal with is in packaged product, or in some cases bulk product, and they can't transport or transfer directly to consumers. And you'll see as we're going down the classes, we're getting closer and closer to the end consumer. We sort of start at the beginning of the supply chain, and then we end at retail, and actually at people's homes or wherever they want it delivered. So a retailer can buy usable cannabis products, paraphernalia from manufacturers, wholesalers, or other retailers for the purpose of resale. They can repurchase or take back usable cannabis from delivery services. They can transfer cannabis and cannabis products to other cannabis retailers or delivery services. They cannot cultivate or package cannabis, and they cannot manufacture cannabis products. Finally, we have our Class 6 delivery licenses. They can purchase cannabis products and paraphernalia from a retailer with an order from a consumer, and then they transport that cannabis or related item to the end consumer. They cannot cultivate, manufacture, or package. They can't store, and they cannot sell cannabis or cannabis products to other cannabis businesses. I do want to note that for everybody, tuning in here, an important facet to these, particularly to the new 3 licenses, is that the law in New Jersey, and this is the law, this is not our regulations. Our regulations follow the law, but the law does make for a delivery license, distribution license, and a wholesaling license. They have capabilities that are also part of some of the other licenses. So like a cultivator, for example, can distribute their own product if they choose. A retailer can deliver their own products if they choose. They could also contract with a delivery service, a distributor, and vice versa, a wholesaler. So it's not like alcohol where there's a strict in alcohol, everything has to run through a wholesaler. They call it the 3-tier system. It's not like that with the law in New Jersey. It's kind of a 3-tier or 6-tier optional system. And so, but that said, I think these new licenses can add a lot of value to the market. I think about new independent retailers coming online. It's probably helpful to have a one-stop shop where they can go pick from an array of products and to stock their shelves. Likewise, there are probably many companies that don't want to invest in actually purchasing a vehicle, hiring drivers and things like that. And so their, distribution or a delivery service would be a great option. Now I'm going to switch to the application process. So the application process itself, I encourage everybody to check out our website, and there's one document in there that is most critical for the application process. But before you get to that, you want to familiarize yourself with the CREAM Act. That's the underlying statute that authorizes everything we do. Then look at our personal use cannabis rules. Those are New Jersey Administrative Code, Title 17, Chapter 30. 30A is medicinal. Those are the rules that underpin everything we do in accordance with the CREAM Act. But we've put everything into, as far as the application process goes, into our notice of application acceptance. It's essentially the roadmap for the application process, both for us at the CRC and also for the applicants. And so whether it's what you have to have in your application, how it's going to be scored, when we're going to start accepting applications, that is all in the notice of application acceptance. So really spend some time familiarizing yourself with that document. Other resources on our website that are important to note: we have FAQs on how to avoid a cure letter. I'll cover a cure letter in a second, but it's really, that's when you have a deficiency in your application, you get a cure letter, you get an opportunity to cure that deficiency. So we have some resources, some FAQs to help you try to avoid getting a cure letter. There are instructions on how to use the application portal. It's fairly straightforward, but it's a complex application. So I recommend reading those as well. And then there's other, over time, we've gotten lots of questions, and when we get a lot of questions on a particular topic, we'll add an FAQ or an explainer on our website. So really look at our website, spend some time getting to know that information there. So before you apply, you're going to want to understand the business types and processes related to the application process. So we just went through the classes of licenses available, and the one that wasn't that I didn't include were testing labs, and those are testing essentially laboratories that do product testing. Every product that's sold in our adult use market has to be third-party tested. So those labs provide that testing, issue certificates of analysis based on the products they test, which are then used to sell those products and can be accessible by consumers. You want to know what size of business you want to start. The statute sets up two, as there are rules. There's a standard business where there are no size constraints. We do have tiers in some cases. So, for example, cultivators, you'll have to pick a tier that you want to apply for, beginning at the bottom at a micro business, which is 2,500 square feet, all the way up to 150,000 square feet, which is the highest tier. For that one, I'd encourage, picking what you think is doable from a financing perspective, from an operations perspective. It's not from what I understand, it's not the easiest thing to run a 150,000 square foot cultivation facility. It's probably not that easy to run a 10,000 square foot, but, really do your research and figure out what's best for your business there. But micro businesses, they're less than 2,500 square feet in terms of cultivator. They have volume restrictions for manufacturers and the other license types of 1,000 pounds per month, which is quite significant. And then they have employee limits. So you can't have more than 10 full-time employees. There are also restrictions on residency in the law for micro businesses. So, for example, your majority owners have to be from either the municipality you're locating in or a neighboring municipality. So that's a consideration. Some municipalities have prioritized micro businesses in their licensing process, like we have. So, I think you really got to do your research and figure out what makes sense for your business when making those decisions. And then there are two license application types and two license types. There's conditional and there's annual. And conditional is really the first step. So when you have a business plan, when you have a regulatory compliance plan, you got your basic business put together, you can come in as a conditional. And that is, you'll basically get, a time limited approval in order to then file your conversion application. And I'll note that conditionals and conversions are prioritized in our application process. So there is an incentive to go that route if you qualify and you can, or you can go right to an annual application. And that's, just a full application. An annual application is more involved than even a conditional conversion application, way more involved than a conditional application. And it's because there's a lot of requirements in the law that we have to adhere to, a lot of things we have to collect based on what is in the statute. But figure out whether you want to start conditional or start annual. Our review times for conditionals, when everything is in order, when there aren't any cures, we're under 90 days now. I don't think we might be coming up on 90 days on some, but for the most part, we're under 90 days on those. For annuals and conditional conversions, it's going to be more in the 6-month range, depending on how many cures you need and things of that nature. But whether you go conditional or not, or right to annual, eventually you're going to have to go through that lengthier application process. And I'll cover the pieces of that in a moment here. As I mentioned, there's these two roads, conditional and annual. Conditionals are prioritized. Now, when you come in as a conditional, you can add new owners and financial sources in the process, but you can't upset your majority ownership. And when I cover, social equity businesses, diversely owned businesses, and impact zone businesses, I'll come back to that point. But between the conversion and your conditional application, you can add new owners and financial sources, but you can't exceed 49% of the business with those new owners. You really got to maintain the majority ownership that you had as a conditional. And conditionals don't need site control or municipal approval. When you come in for an annual, you need to have everything buttoned up, everything ready to go, including your final owners, financial sources, site control, municipal approval. It all needs to be in place. So when you're getting prepared to apply, you want to decide on a legal business structure. And I'm going to kind of breeze through these slides because Tahid is leading the Business Action Center and the Cannabis Training Academy, which is really going to do a deep dive into a lot of the nuts and bolts. And Business Action Center already provides a lot of resources for people to, help make some of these decisions and understand the process that they have to go to. But, you need a legal business structure. You need your federal and state tax ID numbers. You want to choose and register your business. Or choose your business name and register your business and business name, which, again, the Business Action Center provides resources to connect you right to where you need to go to do that. You will want to open a business bank account. We do have banks in New Jersey that do business with cannabis businesses. Would like to see more, but we are fortunate that there are at least some options for cannabis businesses there. This is where I will get into a little bit more of a deep dive. So, you'll want to understand what priority designation you can qualify for and want to qualify for. So there are really three primary types of applications that are really prioritized in our application process. The first one is social equity business, and that gets you the highest overall priority. So if you're a social equity micro business conditional applicant, that's like number one on the list. And a social equity business is a business majority owned by people who either have past marijuana convictions or have lived in an economically disadvantaged area for 5 of the past 10 years, or at least for a portion of time, and then also meet certain income thresholds. So 2 pathways to qualify as a social equity business. A diversely owned business is a business that's certified minority owned, certified women owned, or certified disabled veteran owned, or it could be an MWBE as well. And that receives second highest overall priority, diversely owned businesses. And then third are impact zone businesses. And impact zone businesses are businesses that are either located in an impact zone, owned by people who live in an impact zone, or pledged to recruit at least 25% of their workforce from impact zones. And impact zones are municipalities in the state that are defined by statute. They're, they meet certain population thresholds. They have a certain track record when it comes to arrests and police activity, and I think economic and workforce development issues. So, we have the qualification listed on our website, and we have the whole list of impact zones. So you can take a look and determine which route is best for you. Again, social equity business receives highest overall priority, followed by diversely owned business, then impact zone businesses. And depending on which way you want to qualify, for social equity and impact zone, there we're looking at residency, we're looking at past cannabis convictions, we're looking at tax returns in some cases, and we have resources on our website to help you submit what you need to submit for both of those. For the diversely owned business route, minority owned, woman owned, or disabled veteran owned, there you need a certification from Department of Treasury, Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services. You need that certification when you come and apply in order to move through our process. So make sure you've done that before you apply to the CRC. Importantly, you also want to maintain your qualification as a diversely owned business. One of the things that we do see happen is that the certification is good for 3 years, but there's you essentially have to file every year to maintain that certification, even though it's a 3-year even though the approval is for 3 years. So you want to make sure you do that so that you don't lose your eligibility and then have to go back to DOORS, Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services. So cure letters, when you get an incomplete application, you'll receive a letter directing you how to cure those deficiencies. We note exactly what the deficiency is, and then it's your responsibility to address that and cure it, and then resubmit your application. Really take your time to fill out the application. Make sure you've submitted everything that you need to submit. You can almost go through the notice of application acceptance and use it kind of as a checklist and make sure it's all there. And we actually have a document checklist on top of that on the website that you can use. make sure you upload all that required paperwork and documents, because when you get a cure letter, you have to resubmit and come back into the process. And every time you come back into the process, it's resorted by priority and time. That's not to say that if you're curing your application, we can't review it more quickly. Of course we can. We've already been through it. But, you really want to make sure you minimize those cure letters, because that enables us to keep to those timelines that I was outlining. If you don't have a cure letter, then you can be sure that it's going to be around 90 days for a conditional, and probably in the 6-month range for an annual. When you get cure letters, that extends the time, because it's based on how long it takes you to resubmit, how long it takes us to then re-review the materials. Two numbers here, or a number and an email. We have 2 ways to reach our licensing department. So if you do receive a cure letter, you can reach out to us if you have any questions about it, and they'll help you understand exactly what you need to do to resubmit. You can also reach out both those places for an application status update. People often want to know where their application is. We can't get super granular, but we certainly can give you an update, make sure it's still in process, and whether or not we need anything additional from you at the time. So once we have a complete application or an application, these are really the steps we go through. And these are current averages based on a complete application. So again, this is starting at an application that's complete, that doesn't need any cures. We start with a verification of priority status. So they're sorted based on whether they qualify as a social equity business, diversity owned business, impact zone business, or otherwise. We verify that priority to make sure they actually qualify. The applications are reviewed for completeness to make sure that everything that needs to be submitted, it has been submitted. Applications are then scored. And applications need to score sufficiently high to move forward. I will note, though, that the scoring is really it's more of a pass fail, even though there's specific points for each thing. Either you meet the requirement or you don't. So, if you need 10 points for a particular measure, it's not like you're going to get 7. You're either going to get 0 or you're going to get 10. And if you get 0, you'll get a cure letter noting that you need to cure that one particular scoring requirement. Once something has scored sufficiently high to move forward, then there's a review of qualification for licensure. And this is where things get different between the conditional applications and the annual or conversion applications. For a conditional applicant, this is going to be a very quick review. We're going to just make sure that, if you have financial agreements or proposed financial agreements in place, that they're compliant with our FSA requirements, which I'm going to cover a little later here. We'll look at the business structure, just make sure that it at initial look it's compliant. For an annual or conversion, however, this will then be transmitted from our Office of Licensing to our Office of Investigations, Compliance and Investigations. And applicants will have to undergo a criminal history background check. They'll also have to submit information related to the source of their financing, if to the extent it wasn't part of the original application. So our investigators are really looking at 2 things, identifying the source of funds, verifying the applicant, 3 things, verifying the application information, and then that criminal history background check. Once you pass through investigations, and I get calls all the time, my investigator's done. Am I going to be on an agenda tomorrow? Not, you're close, but still a few more steps. And so importantly, everything that has happened to that point, because we don't want to make mistakes. Everything that has happened to that point, the licensing review, the compliance and investigations review, there's a quality control review, which is really conducted by Office of Legal, Office of Compliance and Investigations, and Office of Licensing. There's a final review before it comes to me. And then once I receive, as the executive director, once I receive a group of applications that have gone through that whole process, then I'll review them and make a recommendation to the board that they should be approved. Then once those applications go to the board, they're voted on at a public meeting, they're approved, and then the applicant receives a final agency decision, and then they can really get to once that happens, then we're working towards a final inspection and license issuance. So I did want to cover, I mentioned financial source agreement in that last slide. I did want to cover some considerations on management services agreements and financial source agreements. And, I do want to note that this is a very challenging business to be in. I've being a part of regulating it for some time, when you have a federal prohibition, when you have trouble accessing traditional financing, when you have, trouble finding real estate that will work with you, everything gets more complicated and everything gets more expensive. That's why, it's really important to be cognizant of, agreements that you're signing, agreements that are being proposed to you. We at the CRC have tried to do what we can to sort of set up some rules of the road for management services agreements and financial source agreements, so that we're cutting down on predatory practices. But licensed applicants really need to be vigilant as well. And when I'm talking about a management services agreement, this is an agreement with a company that agrees to provide things like staffing services, management services to a cannabis business, in exchange for fees or other compensation, but not ownership interests. So, management services contractors can't be owners. Management services contractors can't have more than 5 agreements with cannabis businesses either. That's something we look at. We don't want, one company to sort of dominate the industry. And then cannabis business owners and principals cannot be management services contractors. So if if you own a cannabis business, or somebody who owns a cannabis business is telling you that they want to be your management services contractor, they can. If they're an owner or a principal as defined by our regs, they cannot be management services contractors. What they can include are management, supervision, or hiring of employees, help with operations, technical assistance, accounting or record keeping, leasing of equipment, providing supplies for the business. And then a financial source agreement is more an agreement to fund a business according to particular terms. A financial source can have no more than 7 agreements with cannabis businesses. Some examples of financial sources would be creditors with a secured interest in the cannabis businesses or cannabis business or its premises, or creditors holding an outstanding bond, loan, mortgage, trust deed, or other or note from the cannabis business. Importantly, MSAs and FSAs cannot impose unreasonable fees, interest rates, or returns. They cannot receive an ownership interest in the cannabis business, have an unfair advantage over the cannabis business, have a percentage of business profits greater than the net profits received by the cannabis business. They can't prohibit the cannabis business from selling to or buying from any company, and they can't require the cannabis business to enter into non-compete agreements. Excuse me. They also cannot require cannabis business to enter into, I covered that one, have the power to, they do not have the power to overrule fundamental business operations decisions. They can't last more than 4 years for MSAs, and with FSAs, they can't impose penalties for prepayment or paying off the debt. So for, with both of these, before you sign them, check the document for those prohibited terms or conditions, send us the proposed agreement so we can also take a look at it. And then, for a management services contractor, we're going to need information on personnel, consents to background check, a completed entity disclosure form. And this is all outlined in our notice of application acceptance. Excuse me. Same thing with FSA, check the document for any prohibited terms or conditions before you sign. Send the proposed agreement to the CRC with your application so we can take a look, and submit all that the required information as part of the rules, whether they be personal history disclosures or entity disclosures. Last but not least, some resources. So again, want to encourage everybody to look at the resources that the Business Action Center has. There's also a business navigator where you can go, and it's not unique to cannabis businesses, but you can go on New Jersey's Business Navigator website and choose what type of business you want to start, whether it's a hair salon or a cannabis business, and you can get information on what you need to do to register your business, where you need to go if you qualify as a minority-owned or woman-owned business. So really, look at what the Business Action Center has. We're lucky to have folks like Melanie Willoughby, Penny Wild, and Tahid really leading the charge on providing services for this industry. And then there are chambers of commerce, you know, whether it's local, regional, or statewide. Chambers of commerce can also be a really good resource for would-be business owners. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing here, and Tahid, I'll turn it back over to you to answer any questions.
Jeff, thank you so much for the thorough presentation, talking to us about all the license types that are available in New Jersey, priority statuses, especially around social equity, impact zone, and diversity owned businesses. What are cure letters? That's so important to understand, to really be diligent in your application and business planning process, and talking to us about the application process and timeline, as well as MSAs and FSAs. Really good, insightful conversation there. I truly appreciate your insight. I have no questions. You have answered every single question regarding the license types for us, but we will make sure that for those that need that information, that contact information, we will also share that with viewers too. So if they have any questions, they can reach out and learn more about what the CRC does and start learning about how to get into the cannabis industry. Jeff, thank you so much for your time. Truly appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.